We begin today the Gemara, the last line of that Pei Zayin Amid Beis, Amar Rabbi Yanai. The Gemara before is talking about a poyel, a worker in a field, that during the time that he works, he's able to eat from the fruits, from the produce of the field. So one of the things that learned out from the Pasuk by the Kerem, where it says, V'chalta anovim kanafshecha, that kanafshecha teaches that your eating is similar like the eating of the owner himself. Just like an owner himself, when he eats in the field before there's a gemar malacha, before the produce is finished and made into a pile, when there's a chiyuv of meiser, the same thing is also with the pile, even before before it's a gemar malacha, he can eat without giving meiser. Now what's the chiddush here? And this is going to be a relevant point for the Gemara later. You may have thought that a pile should have the halacha like a lekeach. A lekeach, even if there's no gemar malacha yet, but the moment he buys, he's chayav to separate meiser. So I would think maybe the pile is sort of like buying it, getting it as a payment from the balabas, and therefore the Gemara says that no, he's pater from giving meiser. So the Gemara is going to bring a discussion in connection to this, and is going to ask on this drasha. Rabbi Yanai said, Eina tevel mischayev v'meiser. When you have the tevel, the untithed produce, it won't be chayev v'meiser ad sheyira pnei habayis, until it comes inside the house, and it has to come inside the house from the front door of the house, not any side doors or the roof. Which means even after this produce is a finished product, it was made into a pile, it's still not chayev v'meiser. It has to be brought inside the house. Shenema, the pasuk that says about the person that's paying up his meiser that he didn't pay, biyarti hakodesh min habayis, that I got the kodesh out of the house, I paid the meiseres. So it says that it's in the house, meaning only after you bring it into the house are you chayev. Rabbi Yochanan says, afilu chotzer kivas, even if you brought it from the field where it grows into the courtyard, that's also enough to set the chiyuv of meiseres. It doesn't have to be in the house. Shana, because there before the pasuk also says, "Va'achlu b'sharecha," you eat in your gates. The gates here refers to the gates of your courtyard. V'saveyu, and you're satisfied. So when you eat there inside your courtyard, you have to give meiseres. Fragt the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan nami hoksiv min habayis. According to Rabbi Yochanan, what does he do with this that the pasuk says that you're eating in your house? On Malach, Rabbi Yochanan will answer you, chotzer dumya de bayis. The only reason why it says bayis is because it's in the courtyard, but bringing it into a courtyard has to be similar to when you bring it into the home. Ma bayis hamishtamer, just like in the house, it's a place which is safeguarded. Av chotzer, so too when we say that if you bring it into the chotzer, you'd be chayiv hamishtameres. We're talking about a chotzer with a fence around it that's guarded. On the other hand, Rabbi Yanai nami yaksiv b'sharecha. According to Rabbi Yanai, the pasuk says you bring it into the gates, which would mean even of a courtyard, you should be chayiv. And says the Gemara, Omi boyale, what Rabbi Yanai learns out from b'sharecha is the ma'ayale derech shar, that you chayiv when you bring it into your house, only if you bring it in from the main front entrance. Lafuke, this excludes derech gagois v'karfifais, if you bring the produce through the rooftop, or you bring it from the courtyard, from a side door into the house, the light, then you won't be chayiv. Okay, so that's the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai regarding the chiyuv of meiser. But everybody agrees that when it's out in the field, even after it's finished already, you're not going to be chayiv in meiser yet. So now the Gemara asks from the Braisa, from the drasha we brought before, from nafshecha. Masav Rav Chanina chuzo. So what did we dashen? Ken nafshecha. When a poyel eats in the field, it means like the owner himself. Kach nafshe shel poyel. So too the poyel eats. And that means, ma nafshecha oichelu pater, just like the owner himself eats in the field and will be pater from giving meiser because it's not done yet, it's not a finished product yet. Af nafshe shel poyel, so too the worker oichel upater. He eats in the field and will be pater from giving meiseres. So now this is a drasha for a worker. What's the chiddush here? Only a worker. Ha lekeyach, but if it would be a buyer, chayiv, he would be chayiv to give meiseres when he buys it in the field. My love, don't you think that this means that a lekeach would be chayiv basada, even if it's still out in the field, it wasn't brought into a courtyard, it wasn't brought into a house? So Rashi explains the basis of the Gemara's question is a lekeach we don't require that it should be finished, which is usually called miruach, when it's made into a pile, in order for him to be chayiv meiser. Because as soon as a lekeach buys it, this is for him what its worth is, what he wants. It's considered to be finished, like in a pile, as soon as he buys it. But the other condition that we said, that it has to be brought into the house or brought into the courtyard, that a lekeach should be no different than an owner himself. He shouldn't be chayiv in meiseres, according to Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yanai, either when it's till when it's brought into the courtyard or till when it's brought into the house. So why here is it mashma that a lekeach would be chayiv even if it wasn't the field? So Rav Papa answers that this brayse that says this drasha must be talking about a very unique case. We're talking about a fig tree that's planted and it's standing in a garden or orchard, and the branches of this tree are hanging over into the person's courtyard. Askina, that's what we're talking about. Which means that as soon as these figs are picked from the tree, where are they? They're in the courtyard. So if they're in the courtyard, the lekeach that we said it's mashma from the brayse, if he would buy it, he would immediately be chayiv. Yeah, because it's in the courtyard already. Well, and according to the other opinion, Rabbi Yanai, that says it has to be brought into the house, labayis. We're talking about a tree that's out in the field, but there's a branch that's sticking into the house. And as soon as he buys it, it's already in the house. So the Gemara right away asks, if that's the case, balabayis nami nechayiv. If so, the balabayis should also be chayiv for maestris. Why is it saying that the balabayis in such a case is potter, and the poyol is potter, but the buyer is chayiv, but it's in the house already? And says the Gemara, no, there's a difference. Balabayis einov b'teinasei. Balabayis, what's his eyes on? What is he interested in over here? He's not interested in these few figs that he plucked from the tree. He wants to have all the figs from the entire tree to be taken off, and he should have them all ready together. So therefore, if just a few figs he took off from the tree, even though it's in his house, it's not considered to be something which is a finished thing that you'd be chayiv meiseres in. But lekeyach einov b'mekchay. His eyes are on what he bought. He's only buying this, and for him, this is all it is. This is finished for him, and it's in the house, and therefore be chayiv right away. Now the Gemara asks, though, from another brayse, where we see that a lekeyach is never chayiv to separate meiser min atayra. Fragt the Gemara, lekeyach medairaise mi mechayiv. A person that buys produce min atayra, is he obligated to separate meiseres? Tanya, we learned in the brayse, mipnei ma chorvu chanoyoi shel beis hinoi. Shalosh shanim kard Yerushalayim. There were these stores in a place called Beis Hinoi, and when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, these stores, they were destroyed 3 years before Yerushalayim. Why did this happen? Mipnei she'midu divreyim al divrei Torah. Because they would behave only according to the mitzvah that it is min ha-Torah, and whatever Chachamim added, they didn't do. What was it that they did? Shahayu Aimrim, they would say, what does it say in the pasuk? Aser to aser. You should separate meiser. And then in the following pasuk it says, v'ochalta, and you eat. What do we understand from this? That if you're eating, it grew by you and you're eating it, then you have to separate meiser. But v'loy moichet fu zaracha. But if you're selling your produce, so then the seller doesn't have to separate meiser. And also, v'loy lekeach, person that buys, so then you don't, whatever you buy, you don't have to separate meiser. So you clearly see here that min ha-Torah, there is no obligation of meiser. Elo midrabanan. The whole obligation of a lekeach to give meiser is only midrabanan. Ukra asmachta ba'alma. Before we brought a pasuk of kenafshecha, that a poyol will be potter of the meiser like the balabas, and the chiddush of that pasuk was that the poyol is not like a lekeach, but really that whole drasha is not a real drasha. It's just an asmachta, because really a lekeach is b'chlal not chayiv meiser at all. So there's no reason to think why the poyol should be chayiv meiser here. So Ella also says the Gemara, going back now to that drasha of this word kenafshecha lamayasa. What is this word kenafshecha coming to teach? And says the Gemara, there's a different shader. Like in the Tanya, like we learned in the brayse, that this word kenafshecha relates to the lav of l'sachsham shor b'dishay. When you have an ox that's threshing for you, you're not allowed to muzzle his mouth to stop him from eating. So over here is what we're coming to teach is regarding a worker in the field. Kenafshecha, like the owner himself. Ma nafshecha, just like you yourself. If you're doing work in the field, im chasamta potter. If you muzzle your mouth and you don't eat from the produce that you're working in your field, you're potter. Obviously, regarding yourself, you're not over on loy sachsam and muzzling your own mouth. Av payol, so to when you have a worker, im chasamta, if you muzzle him and you don't allow him to eat, potter. You're going to be potter. The lav of loy sachsam shor b'dishay only applies to an animal. By a payol that you don't let him work, don't let him eat, that is, the lav does not apply. And that's what it's coming to say. Now though, the Gemara goes back to the halacha of Meiseres, the two opinions of Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan. At what point are you chayav in Meiseres? Rabbi Yanai says when you bring it into your house. Rabbi Yochanan says when you bring it into the chotzer, into the courtyard. So on this, Masav Mazutra asks, it says in the Mishnah, Ezeu garnon lemeiseres b'kishuim b'diluim. So what's considered to be garnon, that it's already like finished and it's made as a pile and it's ready, that it should be chayiv in meiseres. So b'kishuim b'diluim, if this is melons or pumpkins, mishi paksu, when the blossom that there is on top of the fruit falls off. Rabbi Asi said, what this means is mishi notl pikar shelahem. They have a certain blossom, when that falls off, it's considered to be finished, ready to eat. So not my love, don't you think this Mishnah is saying mishi paksu, when the blossom falls off, and that's basada, even if it's in the field. It's not only when you bring it into the house or when you bring it into the courtyard. Says the Gemara Loi, it's not a question, mishi paksu, but it's bebayis when it falls off, but when you bring it into the house, according to Rabbi Yanai's opinion. But if that's what the Mishnah means, ihachi mishi paksu, why does it say mishe paksu, from when it falls off? It should say shi paksu. It should say wait until the blossom falls off. Why should it say this lashon wait? Because really just the blossom falling off is not enough. It has to be brought into the house. And then it should say, even after it's brought into the house, it's not enough. You're still not going to be chayiv. You still have to wait. The chayiv of meiseres is only when the blossom falls off. That would be the proper language for this Mishnah. And says the Gemara, no itana achi paksu. If we would use this language, they only chayiv until the blossom falls off. Hava mina, we think ad gamale pikusayo, that only until all the blossom falls off. Kamash Malon, that's why it uses the term mi sheyipaksu, which means michaschule pikusayu. Only when it begins falling off, that's already enough that it's chayiv and meiser. Another question was asked. What is considered to be the goyren, that it's already a finished product for meiser, that you would be chayiv to separate meiser and the issa of tevel, mishitugome melachton, when the work with it is done. When do you finish the work? When you gather the produce together. Now, what does this mean? Says the Gemara, my love, don't you think this means that when you gather it together, even in the field? It doesn't talk about taking it into the house or the courtyard. When you finish gathering it in the field, which is not like Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan that say that it has to be brought either in the courtyard or into the house. Says the Gemara Loi, that's not the pshat over here. Achnasasan labayis. The term achnasasan means when you bring it into the house, according to Rabbi Yanai. Zeu gmar malachtan. That is when it's the work with it is finished. Now the Gemara suggests a whole other pshat here, according to Rabbi Yanai, that says that you're only going to be chayiv in meiseres when it's brought into the house. Ki ka'amar Rabbi Yanai. When did Rabbi Yanai say this condition? That you only chayiv meiseres when it's brought into the house. B'zeisim va'anovim delav b'nei goyreninu. That's by olives and grapes, that you never make them into a pile. There isn't that stage of it being finished and ready by making a pile out of it. So therefore over there, the only thing that determines that it's actually finished is when it's brought into the house. When it comes to wheat and barley, so then over there, it doesn't have to be brought into the house or the courtyard to be finished. The pasuk over there clearly says that when you make a pile, that you're going to be chayiv in meiseres. So over there, Rabbi Yanai agrees that it's even in the field that you would be chayiv in meiseres. Because the Braisa is talking about wheat, barley that don't have to be brought into the house. If it's gathered in the field and it's made into a pile, it's good enough. And Rabbi Yanai was talking about zeisim and anovim, olives and grapes, that they are only going to be chayiv and meiseres when they're brought into the house.
Means a goyren?
Yeah, a goyren outside in the field, right. Rashi points out that the answer, this second answer the Gemara says here in many places in the Gemara, on the Psachim, the Gemara doesn't accept this answer. Rabbi Yanai holds that it's only chayiv and meiseres for everything, only when you bring it into the house. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to what was mentioned before regarding leisachsoim, that when you have a worker working in your field, you have to let him eat, or it's a mitzvah to let him eat. And then when it comes to an animal that's threshing the kernels, also now let him muzzle them, you have to let him eat. So the Gemara says like this: Ashkechon Adam b'mechuber. I find in the pasuk the halacha regarding a worker, a man, that when you have the produce that's attached to the ground and he's cutting it now, then he's allowed to eat from it. And v'shoyer b'tolish, the Torah talks about a ox that's threshing. It's already kernels that he's threshing, that you're not allowed to muzzle him. Adam betalosh minala. How do you know if a man is doing work with produce he's not harvesting now, he's not cutting it now, it's already talosh and he's doing other works with it? How do you know that he's also allowed to eat from it? Kavachayme mishar. Says the Gemara, I can learn it with a kavachayme from the ox. When it comes to the ox, I don't find clearly in the pasuk that it should say that you have to let him eat when there's work that's being done with this ox, when the produce is still attached to the ground. But Eichel Betalish, the Torah clearly says that he does eat when he's threshing and not let him muzzle him. Adam Sheichel B'Mechuber, so a man, a worker that eats from the produce that he's cutting that's now attached to the ground, Einidin Sheichel Betalish. Definitely, if he's doing any other works later on with this produce that's already detached, for sure he should be allowed to eat from it. The Gemara says, no, there's a refutation to this Kal V'chaymer. Ma'alishoy shekain at mitzvah chasimasai. By a shoy, the Torah says a lav, that if you muzzle him, you're over on a lav. By a man, a worker, if you muzzle him, you're not over on a lav. So we see that the Torah is more stringent with allowing an ox to eat from the grain, from when he's threshing. But maybe this itself, Yehei Adam mitzvah achasimasai mekav v'chaymer mishoy. Maybe we should say that if you muzzle a worker, you should be over the lav, and we learn it with a kavachayim from an ox. If it comes to an ox, you don't have an obligation, a mitzvah, to give him life, to feed him. But still there's a lav, you're not allowed to muzzle him when he's threshing. When it comes to a man, a worker, that you are obligated to see that he lives, it says that you have to feed him and support him. Definitely, there should be a law that you shouldn't be allowed to muzzle him when he's working. So you can't suggest that the shayr is more stringent because there's a law of chasima. No, it should apply by a worker as well. But in this, the Gemara says, no, that lav does not apply here, because Amakra, on this, we also learn from the pasuk that we brought before, Kenafshecha, like the owner himself, Kenafshe shel poil, as we said before, like the owner himself, Man nafshe im chasmasei potter. If a person muzzles himself and doesn't eat when he's working, he's potter, obviously, himself, there's no reason to should be chayiv. Af poil im chasmasei potter. So too, when you have a worker and you're muzzling him, you're not letting him eat, there's no lav that applies. So therefore we go back to our question, Ve'ela Adam betolosh minalam. What is our source that a person that's doing work with produce that's already detached from the ground, how do you know that you have to let him eat as well? You can't learn over the kavachaymer from the shoyer, because as we pointed out, the shoyer has a stringency, that there's a lav of lisachsim. And says the Gemara Amakra, the pasuk says, Kama beis pa'amim. In the pasuk it says twice the term kama. In the one pasuk it says kisave bekama sreyacha, and at the end of the pasuk it says again leson of kama sreyacha. So it says twice this term kama, and so we learn out even that pasuk is talking about a person that's doing the work b'mechuber with the produce that's attached to the ground, but we don't need twice this term kama. Tanei inyan la'adam betolish. Instead, you darshan and apply it to a person that's doing work with the produce when it's detached from the ground. Rabami says, the fact that a person can eat even from the produce that's detached from the ground, you don't need a pasuk for this. Because Ksiv, the pasuk says, by the vineyard, the worker comes into your vineyard and he does work for you, and there it says that he can eat. Isn't the pasuk including as well, not only a person that you hired for the harvest to cut the grapes, but also a person that's lifting up the baskets of grapes on his shoulders to deliver it from one place to another. That's what he came in for. It just says kisavai. And the Torah says lechol, that he couldn't eat. So we understand from the context of the pasuk, the lashon of the pasuk, that it includes even someone that's doing a work with the grapes that are already cut in baskets. Now the Gemara asks the reverse. Shoyer b'mechubar minalon. How do I know an ox that's doing work with the produce that's still attached to the ground? How do I know that you also not let him muzzle the ox? Says the Gemara, Kavachaymer, I could make the Kavachaymer reverse of the Kavachaymer that we mentioned before, Meyadam, from a man. If when it comes to a worker, a man, in the Torah, it doesn't say clearly that he's allowed to eat when it's detached. We learned it out with a limud, but in the pasuk it doesn't say it clearly. The Torah says clearly that he could eat from the produce that's attached to the ground. So the ox, where the Torah clearly says that he could eat when it's detached of the ground, when he's threshing, and then shaychu b'mechuber. Definitely you could eat if he's doing work with the produce that it's attached to the ground. Says the Gemara, no, but I can't learn out the ox from the man. As we said before, by a man we find there's an obligation to support him. When it comes to an ox, you don't have the obligation to support him. Now the Gemara questions this itself. Maybe you should have an obligation to feed an ox with the kal v'chomer from a man. And we should say, if when it comes to a man, there's no lav of l'sachsaim to muzzle him, you're obligated to feed him. By an ox that we see that the Torah made a lav, said a lav, that you cannot let him muzzle him. Definitely you should be obligated to feed him. But on that the Gemara says, no, this is not a kal v'chomer, because the pasuk clearly says, v'chai achicha imach, that your brother should live with you, which means you only have to support your brother. Achicha v'lo isha, your brother, not an ox. So we go back to our original question, ve'elo shoyer b'mechuber minolam. From where do I know that an ox that's doing work with produce attached to the ground, that you're not allowed to muzzle him? You can't learn it from a man, because a man is more stringent. It says the Gemara, Omakra, the pasuk says, Re'acha beis pomim. When the pasuk says that your friend comes and works in your field, it says the word Re'acha twice. One of them is extra. So even though it's talking about a man, but if you don't need the extra word regarding a man that's doing the work when the produce is attached, the extra Re'acha is being used for an ox that's doing work with mechuber, that you're not allowed to muzzle him then as well. Ravina says, the two things that this whole Gemara was discussing. How do you know that a man, you have to let him eat when he's doing work with what's detached? And the ox that you're not allowed to muzzle when he's doing work with what's attached to the ground, both of these do not need a pasuk. Any of the drushes that we brought before. Why? He says you understand it from the language of the pasuk right here, where it says, Loi sachzaim shar b'dishay. Do not muzzle the ox in his threshing. Now the word shoyer here is extra, as the Gemara will point out. Machti, let's see. Kol mili isnur b'chasima. It's not only the ox. Any animal is in the isser of muzzling him. Why? The yalfinon shoyer mishabes. As the Gemara says in Bava Metzia, we compare the term shoyer that it says here to the shoyer that it says by Shabbos, when the pasuk says by Shabbos you shouldn't work with your ox. Over there the pasuk adds v'chol behemtecha. So over there it includes any behemoth, and we compare from there that the same thing over here as well, that it's not only an ox. You're not allowed to muzzle any animal. If that's the case, do not thresh while the animal is muzzled. Sure, because of Rachmana Lamali. Why does it try to spell out specifically an ox if it's not only the ox? So here's the drasha. So we say like this: La kushi chaysem lenechsem. We compare the muzzler, in other words, the person that muzzles, lenechsam, to the animal that's being muzzled. And the nachsam, the animal that's being muzzled, l'chaysem, to the person that's muzzling. We compare the man to the animal. In what sense? Regarding this, that you have to let them eat when they work. Ma chaysem, just like when it comes to a man that's muzzling, meaning a man that's a worker that works in a field, oichol b'mechuber. The pasuk clearly says he's allowed to eat from what he works when it's attached to the ground. Af nechsam, so too we learn from there regarding the animal that is not allowed to be muzzled, that oichol b'mechuber. That you're not allowed to muzzle him, he should be eating, he should be allowed to eat even when it's attached to the ground. And the same in the reverse. So man nechsam, oichel betalosh, just like regarding the animal that's being muzzled. So he's not allowed to be muzzled when he's threshing, when it's detached. Av chaysim, so too the man that muzzles, meaning over here refers to a worker that's working, oichel betalosh. He's allowed to eat even when he's working with the produce that's already detached. That's the drasha.